I've played a ton of Celeste, and I think I'm pretty good at it. I've beaten the game multiple times, and I've learned a lot of things about it, so I thought, why not try speedrunning it? Should be easy, right? I was not prepared at all for how painful this process would be. I cannot fathom how people are able to get through this game in under a half hour. I mean, seriously, like, what the hell is this? Regardless, I wanted to learn how to do it myself, and I'm going to try and teach you a little bit about it too. Celeste has a fairly basic fundamental system for movement that gets more complex the more you want to optimize it. You have 4 basic actions that you can perform: dashing, walking, jumping, and climbing. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, it is, until they're all put together and you have to keep track of all of them, especially when trying to speedrun. When trying to speedrun, the main deviations from these typical mechanics are as follows. Dash jumps, performed by jumping after you dash left or right. This is the simplest, but also the slowest strat. You also have hypers, performed by crouching, dashing, and then jumping for higher overall speed. Wave dashes, performed by jumping and then diagonally dashing down and jumping when you hit the ground. This is what you'll be using the most during a run. And ultras, where you dash down diagonally after performing any of the aforementioned mechanics. This can be an extension of any of the previous 3, but is usually used after a wave dash and results in the highest speed. I'll also introduce the reverse and extended versions of these later, so keep that in mind. There's also something called neutral jumps, which happens when you let go of a direction when jumping off a wall. This gives you more height than a directional wall jump and allows you to climb up walls without using stamina. There's wall bouncing too, where you dash alongside a wall and then wall jump off of it without climbing, giving you a massive height boost. A fair few of you will probably have either heard of or used these before, even in a casual playthrough, since they're helpful to both the speedrun and a normal playthrough of the game. These are all used in abundance in the run, and they save you so much time you'd think they were a competent employee at the DMV. Fucking bastards wasting my time all day. Anyways, let's move on to the route. For this, I'm going to explain the rough strategy for each level and some places where strats are used. I'm not going to explain the full levels because another video would do that better than I have. This is just my journey to speedrunning this game. You start with Prologue, where you skip as many cutscenes as you can and hobble your ass to the bridge while jumping to speed yourself up. Jumping actually gives you a small speed boost in this game, and it's only ever really useful here since you don't have your dash yet. Once you reach the end of the bridge and God stops time for you, you can just pause and skip the cutscene rather than dash forward. Forsaken City is all about keeping up your speed. There's not a ton of extreme strats for this one, just run through the normal path as fast as possible. In this room, you can skip the platforms on the right by wall bouncing, and you can collect the strawberry this way too. Then in this room, wall bounce up to the top left platform, and then do a reverse extended hyper. This is where I said I'll explain reverse and extended versions of dash tech. It's possible to get the same momentum from all of the dash techs by doing them backwards, and then moving your stick to the other direction, like so. This is the reverse version. An extended version of these techs just means that you get your dash back at the end of them. This is done by timing them correctly. Here's a non-extended wave dash, and here's an extended one. Extended versions are used all over the run, and reverse versions are used in a few places. I'll point those places out later on. And back to Forsaken City, this room introduces some geometry we can abuse. Spike blocks in this game don't go all the way to the corner, so you can wall jump off of it. And this is much faster than the intended route for this room because it has a setup for it. Slide against this wall, and then let go, and jump when you reach the corner, then dash forward, and you're good. This final room can be done 2 ways, the safe way and the fast way. The safe way is just the normal path, so no worries there, but the fast way involves jumping up the left side and then dashing to the upper platform. This uses a lot of neutral jumps. Then, jump out of the room, go to the campfire, and you're done. Most of Oldside is just using your hyper and wave dashes and going vroom vroom, but there's a few rooms I'd like to elaborate on. The main gimmick in this chapter is dream blocks. Dream blocks can be dashed through and give you a bit of momentum when you come out the other side. You can jump out of them to give you some height and distance as well. In the mirror room, you can hyper or wave dash to near the middle of the room, and then up left dash, which will still trigger the cutscene. Once you skip it, you'll be spawned inside the dream block above you, where you can instantly dash up and continue on your way. Move up and out of the area afterwards, and go to the entrance blessed by God, and in this room you can just use diagonal dashes to go through faster. After this, you're introduced to what people in the community call Battlein, who follows your movement exactly while you get a slight head start. If you touch her, you die. Madeline will be following you for the next few rooms, so it's important to avoid her when possible. In this room, you can actually diagonally dash through this block and come out the other side. And in this room, use 2 upright dashes through these blocks. In the key room, climb over this ice block and dash up to the left, and then hyper and collect the other keys. And in the big room, take your time and use all the shortcuts you can. You'll lose a lot of time if you mess this one up, so it's better to play it safe. Then, just move as fast as you can to the right for the rest of the level. Celestial Resort is by far the hardest chapter for me, and it's definitely the longest. This is because many rooms are based on cycles that you can't control. It's long as fuck, and it also has super long rooms. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it deserves its own dedicated video, and I'm not very good at it. There's just too much to talk about Celestial Resort in this video, but I will show you a strat that it introduces called corner jumps. A corner jump allows you to jump off of corners with spikes on them. To do this, jump once toward the corner, and again when you reach it. You'll want 2 jump buttons for this, which brings me to the topic of keybinds. There's actually a pretty big difference between keybinds meant for speedruns and the standard ones. I play on controllers, so I'll be showing you the controller ones. In general, you'll see 2 jump buttons, possibly 2 dash buttons, and also some additional keybinds for quick restart, allowing you to restart rooms faster, as well as a crouch dash key. A crouch dash is otherwise known as a demo dash, named after Demo James, who discovered the strat you can use them for. Crouch dashes put Madeline's hitbox at about 5 pixels tall compared to the regular 9, allowing you to sometimes pass through spike gaps, which is also introduced here in Celestial Resort. The specific demo dash in Celestial Resort actually has a setup, and it's used in most runs. Grab this pixel of the wall, and when you're at full jump height, crouch dash, and you can make it through the gap easily. The final section of Celestial Resort is the hardest part of the run for me, and it's pretty fucking hellish to deal with, especially if you die a lot like I have. It has a lot of very long rooms in comparison to others, and also Oshiro, who constantly darts across your screen like a fly. Needless to say, it's not too enjoyable. Golden Ridge is a nice change of pace from Celestial Resort, and much easier too. It's a quick level without that many complicated strategies, uses a ton of the aforementioned wave text, so it's pretty chill. The 2 notable features of this level are moving platforms and wind. Moving platforms make a lot of levels pretty slow, so we try to skip them when we can, and wind hinders movement in one direction, but can also help you at the same time. I'm not going to bore you with the details for all of the rooms, but here's a few notable ones. In this big hub room, you can use a corner jump to avoid using the movable platform. And in this room, you can buffer a wall boost into the next room to skip its moving platform. In the next room, you can skip both of these blocks by wall boosting. And in this room, you can hyper off of this block while moving to give you a boost to the end of the room. In this room, instead of going on the intended path up here, you can skip it by hypering off this pink cloud and go straight to the exit. In this room, you're going to have to use your reverse extended hypers or wave dashes to skip these blocks. In the last few rooms, you're introduced to snowballs, which you'll die to if you hit. This is where the majority of my deaths and your deaths will probably come from if you try to speedrun Golden Ridge. There's a few other rooms that I could use as examples of strats, but overall, this is a pretty simple chapter, so I'm going to end it here. Mirror Temple is the first example of using a B-side level instead of the A-side. B-sides are shorter but harder levels of the original A-sides. The thing to note is that completing a B-side also counts as completing the A-side for story progression. If getting the B-side and completing it is shorter than just doing the A-side, you can save a ton of time. Because the B-side is fairly early on in Mirror Temple, it's viable to do this for it. I didn't do this in my run because it only really saves time if you do a very difficult strategy in it, but in higher level runs this becomes necessary. The A-side's relatively normal compared to other chapters, but there's a few skips I'd like to highlight. Search skip is the largest skip in the game and only requires a reverse extended dash jump to perform. You also end up using the Crystal Heart's intended path to skip the need for a key. Other than that, there's some manipulation of seekers for clever key routing, but otherwise the level's pretty simple. Just try not to die. Reflection is my favorite chapter when playing casually, and it's one of my favorites in the speedrun too. In Reflection, you're introduced to the feather, which utilizes 360 degrees of rotation to work, so it's a little bit easier to do with a controller. Feathers move fastest in cardinal directions, so you'll see runners try to move as straight as possible whenever they can. It also introduces what's called Kevin blocks, which are these angry fuckers. They move fast wherever you dash into them. You can use them to get a ton of momentum, which I'll show you later on. There's also a lot more water to deal with than in other chapters, and there's a tech you can do called water boosting where you jump every frame in the water to gain a ton of speed. Not superhuman viable, but sometimes used. When in water, you want to dash as much as possible, and you can use your dash techs in water that has ground directly beneath it to get through it faster. The main problem you'll have to solve is their reflection is very vertical and has pretty long rooms, as well as having multiple paths to take. There's an optimal route for these, so you'll have to memorize all the rooms you have to go through. In the first room, there's a difficult strategy to skip dashing over to the right and hitting this Kevin by wall boosting off the wall on the left. I choose not to go for this because I'm not that great at it. And in the third, you can abuse this Kevin by making him go up immediately and then hyper off of him so you don't have to move him around the other side of the room. In the first big room, instead of going to the left and picking up this feather, you go to the right and do a series of wall jumps before going to the next room. Beyond this, it's mostly just clever routing and good use of momentum via Kevin blocks until you reach this massive room. Normally, it'd take a very long time to maneuver around this place, but there's a few gaps in between these spikes that let you skip massive portions of it. The first two have extremely consistent setups. For the first, just hold onto this wall, and for the second, dash forward just after leaving the first gap and then drop down. The third, you're going to have to maneuver around yourself, so I'd recommend grabbing this checkpoint up here and then just go for it. Congrats, you've just skipped the biggest room in reflection. And this is the room where you can get a ridiculous amount of momentum. I don't personally have a clip of this because it's very hard, but here's a video from AverageImposter showing it in full. Then you have the battle and fight. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because this is a pretty hard section of the run, and each room deserves its own explanation. But most of the time, you're just going to try and go as fast as you can because these rooms are fairly cycle-based. Use a lot of your dash techs here and you should be okay. In general, you can skip a lot of these rooms if you just try and go as fast as you can. Just make sure you don't die in the process. After the fight, and you have your 2 dashes, a few wall bounces and climbs, and you're out. Summit is the final challenge in the run, and the longest level by far. You'll be going through versions of each level you've completed before, and end off with a final section at the summit. I honestly think Summit's a lot easier than a lot of the other levels because there's a direct path and each section is fairly short. 0 meters is about as simple as it gets, just go fast and you should be fine. At 500 meters though, you can skip the entire opening section by doing 2 well-placed wall bounces, and in the room immediately following, you can skip grabbing any of the traffic blocks. There's a few paths here, but you'll just want to beeline towards the end since it's a 70%. In this room, you can do a reverse extended dash jump, but I prefer to just do it normally since it's more consistent. In this room, you have to move tightly around these springs so you don't have to climb and slow yourself down. And in the last room of 500 meters, you can grab this traffic block so you don't have to wait for it later. There is a faster way to do it than you see me doing here, but it's much harder. At 1,000 meters, you'll want to try and use your dashes as much as you can because they won't always be used. In this room, you can just dash diagonally and then go into the next. And in this room, you can dash through the very top of this stream block so you don't have to use the spring. Once you enter the next room, immediately go up and dash through these stream blocks as fast as possible. And in this room, you can jump under this wall, which is surprisingly consistent. In the last room, go as fast as you can and you're good. 1,500 meters is a bastard of a chapter in Summit for the same reason Celestial Resort is. It has a bunch of cycles. This big room's actually pretty chill since you're going to have to wait for a dust bunny anyways, unless you do a cycle skip, which is very difficult. And in this room, you can actually ultra down to the key, but I choose to ignore it and just jump around this block. And it's smooth sailing from there. At 2,000 meters, you'll want to do an extended dash jump over these spikes and head out of the room. Then, you can buffer a wall bounce or do the much easier strat, which is to just jump from here up to the next room. Then you can do a series of hypers to skip most of this cloud room. In this room, you can skip almost the entirety of this block's pathing by hypering off of it and then climbing onto this block, and then doing a surprisingly easy wall bounce off of this wall. In this room, you can skip basically all the blocks by wave dashing under them and collecting the dash crystal, and then wall bouncing to the spring at the end. And the last section of 2,000 meters is easy as pie. 2,500 meters has a lot of very interesting strats in it, but overall is fairly easy. In this room, you can just jump over these spikes and skip having to wait for this block to carry you over. In this room, do a quick wave dash into this block and smash yourself into this wall. And in the room with the key, you can do 2 neutral jumps, using your 2 jump buttons to do so, and dash up to the key, death warping when you get it to save time. In this room, you'll have to do a wave dash and then upright through this small gap so you don't have to wait for the blocks. And in this room, you can do what's known as door skip, which is a meme of a strategy that saves basically 1 second. Use your demo dashes for this one and just dash beneath the doors. The final room is fairly long, so try not to die, and keep it simple for this one. Just save tiny amounts of time when you can. Now you're at 3,000 meters, the final portion of Summit. This is where the majority of the difficult gameplay comes from. The first portion of the chapter just involves wall bounces and climbing, but in the second, you're introduced to downwind. Since downwind hinders vertical movement, and because this section is so vertical, you want to use wall bounces where you can and try not to climb too much. And at the end of this section, just watch your stamina and get a hand from battling. The next section has an updraft, so you want to use fast falling where you can and utilize wall bounces to get even more height. On flag 17, it's possible to save a dash and then go straight for flag 16, but if not, you'll have to wall jump off of here. On flag 14, only wall jump off the middle block and then conserve your stamina to get to flag 13. On flag 12, you don't have to get the last dash crystal if you neutral jump just below the spikes on this wall. Some people skip collecting flag 10 because it's faster. I wouldn't recommend that though, since it's a very long section to make up for if you die. I do encourage you to skip flag 8 though, since it's very easy to get back to this pink cloud without it. On flag 7, it's possible to skip every other wall and then climb up to battling. And on flag 5, you're back to normal gravity, so be careful not to jump thinking you're going higher than you are. And then it's pretty much just casual strats from there. Obviously try to speed it up where you can, but after you reach flag 1, the gameplay slows down. Now just enjoy your ride to the top, skip the cutscene, and then revel in your incredible time. Now let's put all those strategies we learned together into a run. That was my first official run I've ever done, and I feel pretty good about it. Let's see what place I got on speedrun.com. Looks like that would put me roughly at 2,314th place. What the fuck, man?